Welcome back to Within the Book. Today we talk about the terrifying lows, dizzying highs, and creamy middles of RPGs. Customization. Thinking up a character concept and finding ways to represent it through game mechanics is by far my favorite aspect of RPGs. I'm sure many of you can probably relate to making many characters that will never see the light of play. Now, I want to take a minute to say I won't be talking about tips on writing a backstory or role-playing a character arc. While they definitely have their place, this video is not about that. It's about designing the mechanics and systems of RPGs that offer the player the opportunity to customize their character. With all that said, I define customization as any change made to a character during or post-character creation. Personally, I prefer when the elements that make my character are mechanically represented. As with most things said about RPG content, it's entirely subjective to your needs. So before you start designing or homebrewing, ask yourself some questions. Who is this for? Your answer to this question will greatly vary the scope and detail of your designs. Consider who is affected by any changes you're making and get their input. If your answer to this question was myself, you have my sympathies. But in all seriousness, you need to consider the scope of your project for your own sanity. What do I want out of this? Consider the purpose of your design and what problem it's trying to solve. This should hopefully narrow your design, eliminating unnecessary detail, and should make your design much more manageable. Typically, I've run into problems when my design is trying to do too much, making it clunky or bland as it lacked distinct identity. Does something like this already exist? Don't despair if it does. This is actually an advantage, as it shows your idea has merit and other people's ideas could give you some inspiration. Lastly, consider your personal preference when you're choosing customization options. If you're new to homebrewing and designing, leaning into your personal preference is a good place to start, as you should have some strong opinions on those. It's important to remember three things when designing customization options. First, it should influence a style of play or character fantasy for a player. This doesn't have to be entirely game-changing, but enough to differentiate a character. Second, a complex design doesn't equal a good design. The ultimate goal is to create an elegant and expressive experience. Third, use a light touch when applying prerequisites or restrictions for your design. You don't want players to have to jump through a bunch of hoops. I've found that the juice is often not worth the squeeze, especially for light rule systems. To further elaborate on this, I'll be talking about the Fighting Initiate feat from D&D 5th edition. To be clear, I'm not saying that this feat is an optimal feat. I'm saying it fits my arbitrary criteria. Personally, I feel this feat influences many styles of play and character fantasies without being overly restrictive or complex. While you could say that it's really the fighting styles doing the heavy lifting, for me, it's the accessibility of the Fighting Initiate feat that really hits. It's a simple way for a lot of characters who may not have the option for a fighting style to gain a mechanical benefit that reinforces that character's personality. One of my personal gripes are mechanics or systems that provide a limited benefit. My example is D&D 5th edition backgrounds when compared to 2nd edition Pathfinder backgrounds. Compare the Acolyte background of both games. My problem with the philosophy of 5e backgrounds is a tendency to apply broad strokes and put the onus on the players and DMs to fill the gaps. This is seen in the features and characteristics of backgrounds. To me, I dislike this because we, as the players of this game, should and will already do this without needing the express permission of the designers. I understand this is intended for new players or to give inspiration to older players, but it still feels hollow to me. I think this rings true when you consider the changes in the 1D&D playtest package for backgrounds. I prefer the overall design of Pathfinder 2nd edition backgrounds. They are simple and provide benefits that are applicable to many situations. Because of this, I feel like I've made a choice that has funneled my character. Another example of what I'm talking about is a comparison of Pathfinder 2nd edition and D&D 5th edition classes. Compare the Barbarian from both. I find the customization of options in D&D 5th edition classes could be better. I think this is because the customization of classes is centered around a one-time choice that gives your character a package of abilities. While ability score improvements and feats exist as customization options, they compete against each other and this competition feels limiting. On the other side of the coin, I find that the amount of customization options within Pathfinder 2nd edition can sometimes give me a headache. I feel that there is definitely some option bloat in this game. When a player is presented with a large number of choices at one time, they experience option bloat. This can provide players with meaningful and interesting choices, but it will definitely come at the expense of your patience. I wanted to also talk about multi-classing, as I think it relates well to what we've been talking about. Multi-classing is one of those things that seems to often change throughout editions of D&D and by extension games like Pathfinder. Why this is, I can't really say, but I can say that the multi-classing systems I've enjoyed the most are the ones that feel the least restrictive or limiting. The archetype system from Pathfinder 2nd Edition is the multi-class system I find the most satisfying. I feel this is the case because it comes at a relatively small cost and maintains a degree of initial class progression. To explain this system a little, when a character has the chance to take a class feat, if they meet the prerequisites, they can take a feat from any archetype. This is known as a dedication feat. As long as a character has a dedication feat, they may choose any feat from that archetype when they receive the option to take another class feat. This goes further, as the archetype system includes classes that were prestige classes in 3.5 or Pathfinder's 1st edition, like the Eldritch Archer or Shadow Dancer. But it also includes basic concepts like martial artist, duelist, or scout. This system allows players a level of customization which I think can truly make some unique characters and concepts come to life. Another key element of this archetype system is that once the player has chosen a dedication feat, any future benefit is entirely opt-in and the character still benefits from their initial class's features.
Okay.
Oh,
What's up?
no, I'll talk to you after this.
Bookmark it with a word.
Funneling.
Funneling. Funny. Oh, okay. Interesting.
It's about editing.
Spattered.
It's about editing. Editing. When I talk about funneling and limiting, I want a picture of a funnel, or the shape of a funnel, and as I'm discussing what this means, to have it progress down the shape. The way I think about all this is what I'm going to call funneling versus limiting. Imagine a funnel shape. This funnel shape represents the overall character experience when picking customization options. Ideally, this process should be as smooth as possible. As the player progresses further down the metaphorical funnel, the more defined a style their character should have. It's okay for your funnel to have some steepness near the end, as players should be comfortable with their character's style and should know the kinds of things they're looking for. Also, it's generally accepted that there's some level of complexity inherent in RPGs. For the same reasons previously talked about, the Fighting Initiate is a great example of a funneling option. You want to avoid overly limiting options. These are a series of choices that the player is required to make to form a style of play. In this funnel analogy, it'll form a funnel shape with notches. These notches interrupt the player experience. The larger investment for these options, the larger the notch is. This is not always an issue for players, and it certainly is subjective, but I've found it can feel bad if this process doesn't dramatically form or improve a distinct style of play. The Shieldmaster feat from Pathfinder 1st Edition is an example of a limiting feat. It's not necessarily that this feat is bad or suboptimal, I can't really speak on that. It's more that it has 4 feat prerequisites and a base attack bonus of plus 11, meaning you would need to be at least 11th level. That in my eyes is a limiting factor. Another important thing to remember is to avoid options that overly widen a character. These are options that provide a normally reserved benefit at an easy cost. To me, it loses its uniqueness when anyone can take it. I personally feel feats like this overly widen a character. The last tips I'm going to talk about are tips that I couldn't fit neatly in the script so far, but have helped in my journey as a designer and could help you. Start small, but design big. Choose a mechanic within a system that's within a game for your first foray into design. Don't filter your big ideas for those mechanics, write down whatever comes to your mind. Following on from the last point, get words on a page and worry about balance later. The concept of balancing in games is the mind killer. There is a time and place for balancing, and it's not at the concepting phase of design. Being a designer is about trying to get people to feel the way you want them to. Always consider your mechanic or system's identity. What are you trying to evoke? What are you trying to make the player feel? Iteration is king. When you feel like whatever you're designing isn't working well, try something completely different. Even if your design is working well, consider looking back at it with a new perspective, but never get rid of ideas and make sure to always save your previous ideas somewhere else. With all this being said, I don't want people to feel like being a proper GM means you have to be a game designer or you have to create homebrew content. Yes, as the GM for your group, you can change and do anything you want. Yes, as the GM, you do absorb game design concepts, but it is not a failing to rely on what the rules of a game are telling you to do. In this video series, we'll be relating the topic of each video to the game we're making here at Confused Wizards. In our game behind the scenes, we have tried to tackle character customization in 3 ways. First, we separated the benefits a character receives from leveling up into smaller instances as the character increases in experience. To explain this a bit more, a character would need to receive 40 points of experience to level up. At each increment of 10, they receive a benefit. Second, characters in our game have 2 types of classes, one that provides in-combat benefits and the other providing out-of-combat benefits. Also, when a character levels up, they can take an ability from any class, not only their starting classes. These systems, in my eyes, are intended to smooth the player's experience while allowing us to hopefully avoid too much option bloat and maintain character customization depth. Lastly, we allow for systemizing character backstory and personality through our persona mechanic. This is like aspects in Fate. It allows the player to assign their character traits or tags that they can leverage during a roll to get a bonus on that roll. Thanks for watching the video. Let us know what you want to hear about in the future. Do all those YouTube things and see you next time.